My parents took me to a lake when I was 15, tossed me a half-inflated tube and said, "Swim or sink, you ungrateful brat. Prove you're worth something." Then they sped off, blasting music and laughing. I nearly drowned 3 times before a fisherman found me blue-lipped. I told him I was an orphan. Now I'm 36. But this morning, they realized their terrible mistake. They found my number and started calling 30 times a day. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. This morning, 20 missed calls from an unknown number by the time I got out of the shower. At first, I blocked it. Typical spam tactics, right? But then a text came through from a different number. "Lawson, it's your mother. Please pick up. We need to talk to you." I stared at those words for 5 solid minutes, my coffee going cold beside my keyboard. 21 years of silence and now this. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was sitting there in my apartment, the place I'd worked my ass off to afford after starting with literally nothing, when they decided to reappear. Look, I need to back up for context. When I tell people I haven't spoken to my parents since I was 15, they usually assume typical teenage drama, maybe some religious disagreement. Trust me, it's not that. What happened at the lake wasn't a disagreement. It was attempted murder. I was a normal kid, maybe a bit moody, definitely going through that phase where everything my parents said annoyed me. But what teenager isn't like that? My dad, Sutton, was always quick to anger, working construction jobs when he could get them, drinking when he couldn't. My mom, Savannah, was more subtle with her cruelty. The type to smile while twisting the knife. That summer was particularly bad. Dad had been laid off again. Money was tight, and I'd made the catastrophic mistake of asking if I could go to summer camp like my friends. This sparked a week-long rant about how ungrateful I was, how I didn't appreciate their sacrifice. Then came that Saturday. Mom woke me up unusually cheerful. "We're going to the lake today, family day." I remember being suspicious, but also hopeful. Maybe they were trying. Maybe things would get better. The lake was about an hour from our house. Not many people around that day. It was overcast, threatening rain. We parked at a secluded spot and Dad pulled out an old inner tube from the trunk. It was half deflated, barely holding air. I remember him tossing it at me while Mom grabbed the cooler, which I later realized was full of beer, not sandwiches. I was standing by the water's edge when it happened. Dad's hand between my shoulder blades, shoving me forward. I stumbled, fell into water deeper than I expected. When I surfaced, sputtering, they were both standing there watching me. "Swim or sink, you ungrateful brat," Dad said. "Prove you're worth something." Mom just smiled that smile. The one that never reached her eyes. I thought it was some kind of twisted joke until they started walking back to the car. I called after them, half laughing, half panicking. That's when Mom turned and took a photo of me in the water. "For the memories," she said. The engine started, the radio blasted. They drove away. I'm not a strong swimmer now, and I definitely wasn't then. The tube kept slipping away whenever I tried to grab it. The first time I went under, I swallowed so much water I vomited when I came back up. The second time, my leg cramped and I barely made it to the surface. The third time, I don't even remember, just darkness and cold. Robin found me blue-lipped and barely conscious, clinging to that pathetic tube that had drifted near his fishing spot about half a mile down the shore. He said later he thought I was dead at first. He performed CPR, wrapped me in emergency blankets from his truck, and kept asking where my parents were. "I'm an orphan," I told him. "I don't have any." Technically a lie, but also the most honest thing I'd ever said. Robin called the police. I panicked, begged him not to. Told him my parents would kill me if authorities got involved. Something in his eyes changed. Then he got it. He told the officer who showed up that he'd found me swimming alone, that I'd gotten into trouble in the water. Then he helped me get into a group home instead of returning me to them. Said he knew someone who worked in the system. Looking back, I don't know how he managed it, but I'm alive because of him. The next few years were rough as fuck. Group homes, then a scholarship to community college. Working 2 jobs just to afford ramen and bus fare. No one to co-sign loans, no safety net, no family holidays. While my classmates went home for breaks, I picked up extra shifts. I missed a lot of lectures because of work. Studied during breaks and on buses. Graduated with decent grades anyway. Now I'm 36. I have my own security consulting business, a decent apartment, a life I built from absolutely freaking nothing, and now they want to talk. Now, after the initial shock wore off, I checked my socials. Sure enough, friend requests from both of them 3 days ago. Their profiles are mostly private, but their profile pics tell a story. They've aged badly, like karma came collecting badly. Dad looks 65, not 56. Mom's fake smile hasn't improved. I spent hours scrolling through what little I could see. Posted photos of a house I'm guessing they still live in. Dad posing next to a beaten-up truck. Mom shared some family is everything meme 2 weeks ago that made me laugh so hard I nearly choked on my energy drink. By noon, my phone showed 30 missed calls. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped it twice. I did some digging. Perks of being in security. I know how to find info. Seems they've fallen on hard times. Dad hasn't worked in years. Disability from what I can piece together. They've had a lien placed on their house. Medical bills. The usual American nightmare. And now, suddenly, they remember they have a son. The rage I feel isn't hot. It's cold and clear and calculating. For 21 years, I've dreamed about what I'd say if I ever saw them again. I've written mental scripts, rehearsed confrontation, but now that it's happening, those fantasies seem childish. They abandoned me to die. They drove away laughing while I was drowning, and now they want something from me. Look, I'm not the helpless kid in the water anymore. They have no idea who I've become or what I'm capable of. Part of me wants to block their numbers and disappear again. The smarter move probably. But there's another part. The part that still wakes up gasping for air in the middle of the night. That wants something else. That part wants them to understand exactly what they did. To feel the same helplessness, the same betrayal. To grasp at straws while I watch from shore. The 31st call came at 7:13 p.m. This time I picked up. The voice on the other end was older, shakier than I remembered, but unmistakably her. Lawson. Oh, thank God it's Mom. I let the silence stretch for 10 seconds. 20. I could hear her breathing. The slight catch of hope. I remember the lake, I said, and hung up. Then I turned off my phone, opened my laptop, and started planning. They taught me how to sink. Now I'll teach them. Update 1. First of all, thank you guys for all the support on my last post. Wasn't expecting thousands of comments. Your encouragement means more than you know. It's been 2 weeks since I picked up that 31st call. 2 of the most emotionally exhausting weeks of my adult life, but also in a twisted way kind of satisfying. So, here's what went down. After telling my mom I remembered the lake, I ghosted them for 3 days, let their panic simmer. My phone kept lighting up with calls and texts, but I just watched the notifications pile up. Meanwhile, I did my homework. Look, I'm good at finding information. It's literally what I do. Took me less than a day to build a complete picture of their lives. Their address hasn't changed. Same run-down house from my childhood. Dad Sutton hasn't worked in 7 years due to back problems. Mom Savannah works part-time at a dollar store. They're drowning in medical debt. 3 refinances on the house. 2 maxed-out credit cards. They even started a crowdfunding campaign 6 months ago that raised exactly $87. The cherry on top. They've been asking around about me for weeks, contacting old neighbors, distant relatives. Someone must have mentioned I was doing well financially. And suddenly they remembered they had a son. On day 4, I finally texted back. Just a simple, "What do you want?" Mom replied instantly. "We just want to reconnect with our son. We've made terrible mistakes. Please give us a chance." Sure. 21 years of nothing and now they're overcome with parental love. Totally believable. I agreed to a phone call just to hear their voices, to confirm what I already knew. That call was something else. Mom cried the whole time. Dad mostly stayed quiet in the background, occasionally mumbling about how they'd been looking for years. Lie. And how they prayed for this day. Another lie. They weren't religious when I knew them. I barely spoke. Just listened to their performance. They danced around the subject of the lake until I finally said, "So, are we going to talk about how you left me to drown when I was 15? The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the excuses. They were going through a rough time. They just wanted to teach me a lesson. They came back 30 minutes later, but I was gone. They looked everywhere for me. They filed a missing persons report. Definitely a lie. I checked. I let them ramble. Then I asked the million-dollar question. Why are you contacting me now? More silence. Then Mom said something about family being important as you get older. Dad coughed in the background. Neither mentioned money. That's when I decided exactly how this was going to go. I told them I needed time to process, but that I was open to reconnecting slowly. The relief in their voices was pathetic. Then I set the first condition. I wanted them to write me letters, old-school handwritten letters explaining exactly what happened that day at the lake from their perspective. Complete honesty or no relationship. They agreed instantly, too eagerly. The letters arrived 3 days later. I read them sitting on my balcony drinking coffee. Mom's was 8 pages of dramatic apologies and excuses. Dad's was 2 paragraphs basically saying he was sorry, but I had been a difficult child. Neither mentioned driving away laughing while I nearly drowned. Neither mentioned the photo Mom took for memories. Neither felt remotely truthful. So, I moved to phase 2. I called them and said I wanted to meet, but not yet. First, I needed to see if they were serious about making amends. I asked them to go to the mall an hour from their house and wait by the fountain. I'd meet them there at 2 p.m. I never showed. They waited for 4 hours, sending increasingly desperate texts. I watched their location dots on my phone map, not moving from that spot. 4 hours of their time wasted just sitting there hoping. Kind of like when I waited for them to come back to the lake. When I finally called, I apologized profusely. Something came up with work. Could we try again tomorrow? Different mall, even farther away. They agreed immediately. I stood them up again. And again the next day. Each time with a different excuse. After the 3rd time, Dad finally showed some backbone and texted, "This isn't fair. We're trying here." I replied, "Was it fair when you left me in the lake?" No response to that. For the 4th meeting, I changed tactics. I told them to bring something specific, a photo album from when I was a kid, if they still had it, and to meet at an expensive restaurant. I made a reservation in my name, told them to order whatever they wanted, and I'd be there by 7 o'clock. I showed up this time at 8:30. Found them nervously picking at cold food they couldn't afford. The photo album sitting on the table between them. Mom's makeup was smeared from crying. Dad looked like he'd aged another decade in a week. I sat down without saying hello and opened the album, and there it was on the very last page. The photo from the lake, me in the water, fear clearly visible on my face. In the corner of the image, you could see Mom's smiling reflection in the car's side mirror. I took that page out, folded it, and put it in my pocket. Then I asked why they really reached out after all these years. More dancing around the subject. More tears from Mom. Dad staring at his plate. Finally, Mom broke. They were going to lose the house. Dad's medical bills were piling up. They had nowhere else to turn. They'd heard I was doing well. Could I help my parents in their time of need? There it was. The truth. Finally. I nodded, signaled for the check, and paid their $200 dinner bill with my card. Then I told them I'd think about helping, but I needed proof they were truly sorry first. Over the next week, I had them jump through increasingly humiliating hoops. Told them to sell Dad's prized fishing gear, the expensive rod collection he'd mentioned during dinner. They did it. Sending me photos of the pawn shop receipt. Had them write public social media posts apologizing to me without explaining why. Vague enough to make their friends uncomfortable, but specific enough to be obviously about me. I had them drive 2 hours to deliver a coffee to my building doorman with a note saying it was from them to me, knowing I wasn't even home that day. Made them send photos of themselves holding signs saying, "We abandoned our son." Told them the photos were just for me to help me process my feelings. I never planned to share them anywhere. That would be too cruel even for me. Each task was met with diminishing resistance. Their desperation grew with each passing day as their financial situation worsened. Dad texted about a final notice from the bank. Mom called crying about how they might need to live in their car. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then came last Wednesday. I was having a rare moment of doubt about my revenge plan while making dinner. My phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was them calling from yet another phone. It was Robin, the fisherman who saved my life. I hadn't spoken to him in years, though we'd stayed in loose contact through social media. He got straight to the point. Your parents came to see me today. They found me through the local fishing forum. They asked about the day I found you. My stomach dropped. Robin continued. They seemed desperate to understand what happened. The woman, your mother, was crying when I described how blue your lips were. The man, your father, couldn't look me in the eye. I asked Robin what he told them. He said he told them the truth, that I was minutes from death when he found me. That I begged him not to send me back to them. That helping me get into the system instead of returning me to them was the one thing in his life he was most certain he'd done right. Then Robin asked me something that made me sit down hard in my kitchen. What are you doing, Lawson? I told him everything. The calls, the letters, the hoops I'd been making them jump through. With each detail, I felt less righteous and more empty. Robin was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. I'll go with you. Go where? I asked. To face them properly. He said to finish this at the lake. The lake. Of course, it had to be the lake. That night, I texted my parents. I told them I decided to help them with their financial problems. But first, I needed to see them at the lake where it happened. They needed to bring proof they'd put their house up for sale because I'd only help if they were all in on rebuilding our relationship. I told them to meet me there at noon on Saturday. Robin agreed to be there, too. Not to intervene, just to witness, to make sure I didn't lose myself in the process. It's Friday night now as I'm typing this. Tomorrow is the lake. Tomorrow they'll realize this was never about money. It was never about helping them. Tomorrow they'll understand exactly what it feels like to be abandoned by someone you're counting on to save you. I've made all the necessary arrangements. Their financial information is open on my laptop. The photo from the lake is sitting next to my keys. Part of me is wondering if I've gone too far. If this whole revenge plan says more about what I've become than what they did to me. But then I remember gasping for air, swallowing lake water, my vision going dark. They taught me how to sink. Tomorrow they'll learn how it feels. Finally, update. I've been staring at my screen for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to start this final update. My hands are still shaking a bit. Not from anger anymore, but from something I can't quite name. The lake looks different in early spring. That was my first thought when I pulled up yesterday morning. Smaller somehow, less threatening. The water was calm, reflecting patches of clouds. For a second, it was hard to match this peaceful scene with the place that's haunted my dreams for 21 years. I arrived an hour early, parking my car where it couldn't be seen from the main lot. I needed time to center myself, to remember why I was there. Robin texted that he was running 15 minutes late. His granddaughter had spilled juice all over him right as he was leaving. That mundane detail almost made me smile despite everything. Life goes on, even on days that feel monumental. At 11:45 they arrived. Same beaten-up truck Dad had in his profile picture. I watched through my binoculars as they got out, looking around nervously. Mom was wearing what was clearly her good outfit, the kind of clothes you save for job interviews or court appearances. Dad walked with a visible limp, leaning on a cane I hadn't known he used. They looked small from where I was watching, older than their actual ages, diminished somehow. I texted Robin my exact location and waited until I saw his familiar figure approach them. Part of the plan, he would meet them first, pretending to just be a random fisherman until I arrived. I wanted to see how they'd react to him. This stranger who knew the truth about what they'd done. Through my binoculars, I watched the recognition dawn on their faces when Robin introduced himself. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad took a physical step backward. Even from a distance, their shock was obvious. I gave it 10 more minutes before I walked over. Those 10 minutes stretched into eternity. My heartbeat sounded like waves in my ears, rhythmic, insistent. By the time I approached them, Mom was openly crying, and Dad was staring at the ground, his knuckles white around his cane. None of us spoke at first. The only sound was water lapping against the shore and Mom's stifled sobs. Robin stood slightly apart, solid and calm as always. Finally, I broke the silence. "Well, you brought the house paperwork." Mom fumbled in her purse, hands shaking so badly she dropped her keys. She pulled out a folder with a real estate listing agreement. They'd actually done it. They'd put their house up for sale because I told them to. The power I felt in that moment was uncomfortable. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? Them desperate, willing to do anything. Then why did it feel so hollow? I took the folder without opening it. Then I pointed to the exact spot where they'd left me all those years ago. "Do you remember what happened right there?" Dad spoke for the first time, his voice cracking. "We made a mistake. We were stupid and cruel and we made a terrible mistake." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is taking a wrong turn. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Mom tried to approach me, arms outstretched. I stepped back. "Don't touch me. I didn't come here for a tearful reunion." Look, I had this whole speech planned. This moment where I'd lay out exactly what they'd done and how it affected me. How I couldn't sleep with my head underwater in the shower for years. How I flinched whenever anyone raised their voice. How I struggled to trust anyone. How I'd built my entire life around never needing anyone's help because the people who were supposed to protect me had thrown me away. But standing there looking at these broken down people, the speech felt unnecessary. They knew what they'd done. The question was why they'd done it. So I asked them, not rhetorically, not as an accusation. I genuinely wanted to understand how a parent could do that to their child. The story that emerged was ugly and sad and maddeningly human. Dad had lost his job that week. They'd received an eviction notice that morning. They were both drinking heavily, fighting constantly. Mom had found drug paraphernalia in Dad's truck. Dad had discovered Mom was planning to leave him. I was the convenient target for all their rage and fear and self-hatred. The moody teenager who wouldn't stop complaining about how unfair everything was. Dad, in a moment of what he called temporary insanity, suggested teaching me a lesson. Mom, drunk and bitter, agreed. They never meant to leave me there for more than a few minutes, but then they started fighting in the car, pulled over at a bar down the road, kept drinking, lost track of time. When they finally remembered and went back, I was gone. They did look for me half-heartedly, shamefully, but were too afraid of legal consequences to go to the police. By the time they sobered up enough to realize the full horror of what they'd done, I had disappeared into the system. Every word they spoke made me feel simultaneously validated and cheated. This wasn't the calculated cruelty I'd imagined all these years. It was something almost worse. Careless disregard from people too absorbed in their own problems to recognize they were destroying a life. Robin, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. He described finding me that day. How close I'd been to drowning. How I'd begged him not to send me back to them. The fear in my eyes. Mom collapsed onto the gravel, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad looked like he might vomit. Robin continued, his voice steady. He told them how he'd checked up on me over the years, how proud he was of what I'd become despite what they'd done, how he'd worried about me reconnecting with them. Then he asked the question I hadn't. Are you different people now than you were then? The silence that followed was heavy with 21 years of choices and consequences. Dad finally spoke. I got sober 16 years ago. Haven't touched a drop since. Too late for you to see that, but it's the truth. Mom wiped her eyes. We've been in therapy for the past decade, separately and together. We know we don't deserve forgiveness. I looked at the folder in my hands. The house they were willing to sell for a chance to be in my life again, and I realized something important. My revenge plan had never really been about making them suffer. It had been about making them acknowledge what they'd done, about forcing them to face it without excuses or minimizing. And they were doing that now, standing in the very place where they'd abandoned me. I handed the folder back to Mom. "You don't need to sell your house." The relief on their faces was painful to watch. "But let me be clear," I continued. "I'm not forgiving you. I don't know if I ever can. What I am doing is stopping this cycle of hurt." I took out my phone and pulled up a document I'd prepared. It was a simple agreement. I would help them avoid foreclosure with a one-time payment directly to their bank. In exchange, they would continue therapy and respect my boundaries about contact. No tearful family reunions. No pretending the past didn't happen. Just a clean, clear arrangement that would let all of us move forward. They signed it without hesitation. As we were preparing to leave, Mom asked if she could say one more thing. I nodded. She told me she'd kept my room exactly as it was the day I left. For 21 years, she'd dusted it weekly, changed the sheets monthly, as if I might come back any day. It was her penance, she said. Her reminder. That detail hit me harder than anything else. The image of her maintaining a shrine to her biggest failure for 2 decades while I'd been busy building a life and trying to forget they existed. We didn't hug. We didn't make plans to meet again. I simply told them my lawyer would contact them about the payment arrangements, and I walked away with Robin beside me. Back at my car, Robin asked if I was okay. I wasn't sure how to answer that. Was I okay? No, but I was something lighter, maybe. Like I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't actually part of me. I asked Robin why he'd stayed in touch all these years. What made him take such an interest in a random kid he'd pulled from a lake? His answer was simple. Sometimes life puts you exactly where you need to be. That day, he was supposed to fish at his usual spot, but felt drawn to try somewhere new. He listened to that feeling and ended up saving my life. We stood there in comfortable silence for a minute. Then he asked if I wanted to grab lunch. Nothing fancy, just the diner down the road that served decent fish sandwiches. No heavy conversations about the past or future. Just 2 people sharing a meal. I said yes. That was yesterday. Today, I woke up and realized I'd slept through the night for the first time in weeks. No dreams about drowning. No startling awake, gasping for air. This isn't a neat Hollywood ending. I'm not suddenly healed or ready to play happy families, but I'm not drowning in rage anymore either. My therapist would probably say something about closing cycles or narrative resolution. All I know is that the lake doesn't seem as big as it once did, and that's something. Thanks for reading. Your comments and support through this whole mess have meant more than you know.